Hey everyone, it is Monday, and you know what that means in our expert series. We bring back Greg Dickerson. How you doing, Greg?
I'm doing great, Michael. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Folks, if you enjoy these conversations with Greg, do yourself a favor. I have a playlist dedicated to Greg on this channel. We have hours of interviews with him there, answering all types of questions. So if you like what we talk here, which many of you do, make sure you check out the playlist because there's hours of material that you could watch from Greg. So thank you very much for doing this with us, Greg. I thought we'd talk about home prices first. One of the questions I get a lot is, why does Greg think home prices are not going to go up in the next couple of years? And I'm on the side of, you know what, I think prices got a year or so to run. So let's break that down a little bit.
Yeah. So when I say that, and I did read that comment, I do read the comments and saw the question. So I don't see exponential upside. And the reason is housing prices now, the way things are going right now, are limited not only to what somebody's willing to pay, but what they can pay. So you have to put a down payment up, and that monthly payment has to be a certain percentage of your debt to income ratio. You only can spend so much money on housing. So that's what I mean by we're at a peak. So what I'm saying more than anything else is we're at a peak right now. Is there a little bit of upside potential? Sure. Is there a little bit of downside potential? Sure. Is there more downside potential than upside in the future? You could argue that there might be, and a lot of the doomsdayers are calling for a crash in housing prices. But what I see is from an affordability standpoint, you can only pay so much for housing, and people are only willing to go so far. So in every market, everybody who's listening, take a look at your market. There are houses that are not selling in your market where other houses right next door sold in days. And it's either because it's overpriced for what it is, where it is, or it's just a really odd house or whatever. But there are houses that are not selling in every single market where other houses are selling in days. And again, it's usually because it's either overpriced or something else is going on, but usually it's overpriced. So buyers are pushing back at a certain point. They're not paying anything for a house because they got to be qualified. They got to put a down payment up, and they can only spend so much on their housing. And when somebody gets to the point, I'm talking median housing level, the average, middle class family or lower income family that's buying a house that can qualify, they're not going to put 50% down so they can afford the payment. They're just not going to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the things I want to talk about here is you're right. There's so many doomsdayers out there because doom and gloom sells, it gets clicks, right? They're talking about a 40 or 50% crash. I'm on record saying, nationally speaking, I bet you housing values are up 10% or more between now, October, and December 31st, 2021. So I'm on the entire other side of that equation.
Yeah, I could see that being possible. 10% is not a huge bump in house prices. So that's not, but would they be up double? That I don't think. Can they go up 5 or 10%? Sure. Is it better to know the top than the bottom? So what we do know right now, it's the hottest housing market we've ever had, the lowest interest rates we've ever seen, and there's multiple offers for good houses, priced right in the right areas. So that's why I say know the top, and if you're a seller, now's the time.
Yeah,
Can it go up a little bit? Sure. Can it go up significantly? I don't know. Can it also come back down by the end of next year? Sure.
Yeah, I think all of that is rock solid. The one little wrinkle in all of that I think is unique to this time is it's the rush out of the urban areas. And I just talked about, there was a couple in New York that was talked about in a Bloomberg article. And I'm going to talk about this couple because I think it's happening in most big cities. They were renting in Battery Park for $5,500, right? Husband, wife, 2 kids. I don't know where Battery Park is, but $5,500 for rent seems like a nice place to me. They just moved to upstate New York. Their mortgage payment's $1,000. Talk about the life. I mean, that's life changing. In theory, mom or dad could stay home and raise the kids now. I mean, that's a $4,500 drop. Maybe it's $3,500 when you include all the other housing costs. But I think that's happening in droves. And that's one of the reasons I believe the next 12, now 15 months sees upside. It's because we are taking the tippity top renters and making them homeowners like we've never done before. I just think we've never seen this wave before.
Yeah, $5,500 will buy a lot of house and a lot of yard in a lot of areas in this country, all in taxes, insurance, maintenance, the whole 9 yards.
Yeah.
That's a pretty hefty payment to be paying for rent,
Mm-hmm.
to be in a city where the reason you're there is supposedly for opportunity, for entertainment, things like that have, kind of gone by the wayside here lately with things. And that's why there's a lot of people leaving the city. But again, 8 million people in New York, you got a couple 100,000 that are leaving over the next year or so. It's not going to really make a dent, in the overall market, but it is in a lot of areas.
Yeah. See, I don't think it dents New York, right? The supply demand balance. But if 20% of that couple 100,000 goes to one area in upstate New York, it could impact that area for sure.
Yeah. And we're seeing a lot of that. And there was an article the other day about Denver, how the Denver, Colorado,
Hottest market.
is just
Yeah.
blowing up because, people want to go to Denver,
Yeah. And for me, it's Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe is one of those sleepy markets where an average days, years ago, average days on markets was over 180 days because it's
Yeah.
a very niche buyer, right? But now prices are up 25% and average days on market sub 30 because everybody's
Yeah.
just buying
Yeah.
cash. So that's why I
Yeah.
think
It's interesting.
that's why I think the next 12 to 15 months, I'm calling 15 months, is going to see double digits across the country. San Francisco, trouble. New York, trouble. Portland, Seattle, trouble. But nationally speaking, I don't see a crash. Now we could see there could be pain. There could be pain lurking in all this because I see such a disproportionate buyers using FHA mortgages, the low downs. That could eventually be a problem. If that spins out of control more and becomes, a dominant buying vehicle, that's going to be a problem in
Now,
years.
that'll go into the later part of the discussion that you wanted to have today about, what happens if we get a Biden win, Biden Harris win, and how does that affect the business going forward? So make sure we visit that in terms of housing affordability and going back to a pro housing mindset to balance that disparity between, the middle class and the lower income that can't afford housing. And what happened the last time we went on that affordable housing trend, trying to put everybody in a home that, and how that could potentially impact. But yeah, the exodus is real. People are leaving major cities. It's not enough to make a real significant impact in those cities, but it's enough to make a big impact in a lot of these other areas, like a Nashville, Tennessee, some of these smaller towns up around New York. There was articles the other day about, 10, 15,000 people moving into this one little town that only had a population of 3,000, and they're like, this is great, but we don't have anything, we can't take care of these people, but they're excited about it. They're a sleepy little town.
Yeah.
I think it's like a lake town, summer vacation destination up there, but it's a real thing. We're seeing it everywhere. We're seeing it at a minor scale. And the big thing is California. Everybody's coming out with, I'm leaving California and here's why.
Yeah. Let's talk about that. All right. Graham Stephan was first off, Joe Rogan. This is the list I saw. Joe Rogan. There was another YouTuber, I forget his name, who's going to Nashville, Tennessee. Joe Rogan's going to Texas. Then Graham Stephan's going to Vegas. And then yesterday I saw Meet Kevin do I'm going to slam California video. And and then I talked to Brian Lebo, who's a broker in Vegas for 30 years. And he's telling me every $1 million home is a California buyer, right? Vegas has different markets, but everything over 7 figures is a California buyer. And most of them are paying cash because they're walking away with huge.
Vegas and Arizona.
Yeah, it's huge. So the California exit is real. I guess one thing I have to talk about is, am I leaving California? So I have to answer this in steps. I am not personally against it. I would love to live somewhere else. Frankly, my dream is I would love to have 3 condos around the world, right? Put one in Australia, one in Asia somewhere, and then maybe one in the US or South America somewhere. I mean, that would be my dream, right? Just wherever it's warm, be there. That's not my wife's dream. So she wants to be here. We talk about it occasionally. We're not going anywhere is the long answer of that. But I certainly understand lots of people are leaving. Lots of my sales, I have a lot of sales reps that are in my kind of network. If you look at my LinkedIn profile, many of them make multiple 6 figures a year. And plenty of them have moved to Reno, right? It's kind of the closest town to where I live. They're like, hey man, I go live in Reno and save 13.3% or 13.9% on state taxes, and I can still do my job. So California is in trouble. California is going to have a decade of pain, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was way ahead of my time. I left California in 1989. So, so I spent my younger years in California. My dad was military. We were in San Francisco, then San Diego. So I did all my preschool from 2 years old until fourth grade was in California. And then what I remember the most was San Diego, Southern California. Then we moved to Pensacola, Florida, where I grew up, fifth grade, 11th grade. And then I joined the Navy right out of high school. And I was stationed in California. So I actually lived in Long Beach, Huntington Beach. I was stationed in Long Beach. I lived in Huntington and traveled all up and down. So, I love Southern California. I love California. It's unfortunate, what's happening and what's going on. Obviously the fires are a big issue. The unrest in the cities and the things that are happening in the cities, and they're not doing anything about the homeless situation, at scale. So I mean, there's just so many things, but California is a wonderful place. It's a wonderful state, and it's a shame to see some of the things that are happening that they're just not taking care of and doing anything about at the government level. I'm not talking about the citizens and all that. I'm just talking about the politicians. They're just ignoring a lot of things and not taking care of business.
Yeah, California again. The bed is made, if you will. I truly believe we're going to have a decade of pain. I've been here for nearly 5 decades. I remember when San Francisco was unsafe and dirty and dangerous and smelly and just all those things. And it's coming back. And I don't envision the bottom in San Francisco until probably 2025. Right? It's already going down, but it's got a long road to go. It's got 60% of the small businesses already closed, right? There's just nothing good going on. And then you have companies leaving because of tax reasons. Palantir being the most obvious example. Palantir, while it was private, changed its headquarters from the Bay Area to Denver, Colorado. And then it went public. So now, their tax rate in Colorado is 3.3% versus what would have been 13.3 here. It's just people leaving. SoCal, the Hollywood, the fact that Disneyland isn't open when Disney World is open. It's I don't understand what our leadership is doing. It is seemingly trying to crush dreams, and they're going to be paying for it for a decade.
Yeah, it's interesting times. The thing that I'm really curious to see is what's the impact for an area like Palo Alto, Silicon Valley. What does that look like? The wine country. A lot of that's in real trouble right now with the fires.
Yeah.
What's that going to look like moving forward? And then you have the port of Los Angeles. You have all there's huge industrial areas there that aren't going anywhere. That's where a lot of the goods come into this country. So a lot of interesting things, a lot of dynamics out there. I mean, California, there's a lot of state in California to see between the North and the South. And, I've always been a Southern California guy. That's just kind of where I was, but the Pacific Northwest is gorgeous as well. So really interesting. It'll be interesting to watch and see how that changes once people really get fed up and the exodus really makes a dent. Like I said, there's so many people. I don't even know what the population of California is right now, but it's huge to where the exodus you're seeing, it's not going to really make a dent yet, but it will in pockets.
Yeah, well, I think there's a couple of things. I think it does make a dent where it hurts the government. One of the things that we're clearly seeing is the most financially flexible are leaving first.
Yeah.
Right. And again, we can talk about Joe Rogan and Graham Stephan and these folks who are 7-figure earners going, "Oh, I'm out." And that's happening in mass. And oh, by the way, they're telling everybody about it, right? 10 years ago, when a millionaire left, you didn't hear about it. Now you've got Graham Stephan, who's got 2.5 million subscribers, telling everyone that he's leaving California and here are the reasons why. And then you watch that as a California resident going, "Oh, shoot, it's good enough for Graham. Maybe I should think about it." So I think this wave, just like we talked about that couple from Battery Park leaving to upstate New York, I think it's going to accelerate because people will talk to people and it's just starting.
Well, and, you're seeing it in the Northeast because, another high tax region is, New York, New Jersey, those areas have really, really high real estate taxes. And, when you look at a place like California or up in those areas, I mean, that's real money. When you're spending, if you're an upper income earner, $400,000 or $500,000 to $1 million or more, and $100,000 to $200,000 to $250,000 worth of your income is gone in taxes that you wouldn't have to spend in Texas or Florida or, Arizona or Nevada, somewhere like that. I mean, it just, at some point you got to do the math and go, man, we're just throwing away hundreds of thousands of dollars, and for what? That's the real problem. I don't mind taxes. The problem is that the tax money is just, it's funneled to certain pockets, and it's wasted and squandered. So at some point, people start to rise up and say, wait a minute now, our tax dollars are not going where they're supposed to be going. And I think we're in the middle of a lot of that right now, a lot of discovery. And again, part of the next conversation, in terms of how that can impact the business we're in and things like that. But taxation is a huge issue. I'm all for paying taxes, and I don't mind paying more taxes if it's used properly. The problem is it's not. And, unfortunately, the way our government's set up, it never will be. And the more we pay, the more gets wasted.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's switch gears. Obviously, California is a blue state, as we know. New York, obviously another blue state we just talked about. Goldman Sachs just came out today, read one of their analyst reports. They're talking about, for the first time, a chance of a blue wave being greater than 50%. They actually pegged it exactly at 60%. So 6 in 10 chances of the House, the Senate, and the presidency being a Democrat come inauguration in January. I'm curious, when you hear that, and obviously you're a businessman, been a businessman for decades, what, if anything, changes in your model? What do you look, because there will be some things that are encouraged, some things that are discouraged. And if there is truly a blue wave, they're going to have an expedited path to get stuff created and approved, right? There won't be a battle or a fight or negotiation. It'll just fly through the system.
Mm-hmm. Well, I had this discussion with somebody the other day, and, there's really nothing you can do. So you just need to change your business model to understand what the new impacts and costs are going to be. And all you can, speculate on is what they're saying. So a lot of the tax, loopholes and incentives are going to go away. Yeah. Taxes are going to go up for everybody. And, for anybody who's listening, this whole, taxes are only going up for people making $400,000 a year or more. It's going to go up for everybody. Everybody's going to feel it. Universal health care, which is, where they're headed with that, is going to affect everybody's taxes, and that in and of itself is a tax. And for everybody listening, has your health insurance premiums gone up, since the Affordable Care Act? So, I mean, the things that they're not talking about just blow my mind. With the Affordable Care Act, whether you're Democrat, Republican, whatever, your health insurance premiums and your healthcare costs went up. I don't care who you are. You got less benefits for more money.
Mine did.
They did cover pre-existing conditions, which is great, and I think we should have that. But what we don't have is we don't have competition. We can't cross state lines with health insurance. So now you have this government mandate, and it's putting everybody in one little bucket, creating monopolies. And the government right now is going through an anti-monopoly, antitrust across the board with big internet companies, but they're not doing it with health insurance. So there's a lot of things that they need to be talking about that they're not talking about. But at the end of the day, I know, with what I pay for health insurance versus what you get is not where it was, 10 years ago. And, it's almost tripled from where it was 10 years ago. So anyways, the potential of that, coming down the pike, that's going to affect everybody as a tax, just the health insurance alone, which I agree. In this country, we should figure out a way to cover everybody. Health insurance shouldn't be such a big mystery, right? Healthcare, good health
I agree with that. Yep.
Or healthcare. So that's a big one. Real estate taxes and incentives, corporate business taxes and incentives, and income taxes. It's going to be a tax and spend, philosophy. If you have a Democratic, House, Senate, and White House, it's just going to be thing after thing after thing of tax and spend, tax and spend. So you just have to figure out. And here's the question I posed to somebody, the other day when we were talking. I said, okay, if you're going to go start a business, and right now, you're going to pay 20, 30% in taxes. I said, is it going to stop you from starting that business if you're only going to pay, if you're going to pay 50%? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? It's not going to stop you from doing business. It's not going to stop you from going out there and doing what it is you know how to do just because you're going to get taxed more. You're still going to do, what you're going to do. I mean, Jeff Bezos wouldn't have stopped Amazon if you said, look, you're only going to make $2 billion versus $150 billion. He would keep going, So it's not going to stop us in that regard. What it will affect and can affect is how fast a company can grow now. Because if you get taxed, you don't have those profits to reinvest. So it can affect the rate of growth, but it's not going to stop me from going and doing a real estate deal. I'm just going to say, okay, And for everybody who owns real estate, this is where your values can get affected across the board, residential or commercial. And this is where you could potentially see, some issues in house prices going into next year. And this could go either way. If taxes exponentially go up at every level to own real estate, and you no longer have, interest deductions and things like that you can take advantage of, or accelerated depreciation or cost segregation, if all those things go away, that will disincentivize potentially, people to pay as much as they're paying for real estate, because these taxes and tax incentives offset it. So that could potentially drop the price of real estate assets, because you might have less people participating. If interest rates go up as we move forward, if you get into a tax and spend kind of an environment where the wealth is redistributed, how they're, talking about doing, that could potentially create some inflation at the consumer level, which could then, drive the Fed to raise interest rates. That will tank the housing market. So there's a couple of things that could result and really greatly affect things. So you just need to be aware of it, prepare for it. And again, it's not going to stop you from doing deals, and it shouldn't. You just need to understand what the cost of those deals are, so that you can underwrite that and calculate those risks going forward.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things when I think about a blue wave. And again, I think 60% likelihood is probably a fair number today, given, the changing landscape. So yeah, taxes are going to go up. I agree. I think they're going to go up for everyone.
I will qualify what I just said.
Mhm.
Higher taxes will not stop me from continuing to be an entrepreneur, create, and do deals.
Mhm.
But if the penalties exponentially outweigh the risk, then I'm not going to do it. So let's take Jeff Bezos. Okay. So a company like Amazon, if you knew going into it, the government is going to automatically take half of everything you make right off the top, and they're going to regulate the heck out of you to where you can't be productive and limit your growth. Well, you might not be as incentivized to take that risk and to do some of those things. You might just say, you know what, I'm just going to do something else.
Right.
And there could become a point where doing business becomes so punitive, it just doesn't make sense to take that risk and to do that business. When you get into an environment where you're told how much you can make, which government is looking at, companies should only be able to make so much money, individuals should only be able to make so much money. So if you get to a point to where you're told, hey, I don't care what you do, you're only going to be able to keep X amount of what you make, that could disincentivize you, to get out there and create and do something and take that risk.
Yeah. Yeah. So when I think about what might be coming, I think there's a couple of things that are certain. First, you're right, taxes go up for everyone. Second, I think it is very clear, if there is, again, a blue wave, a Democratic sweep, they are going to go after real estate developers. They are going to hold up President Trump's tax return and go, this can never happen again. And they're going to look at every loophole, what they'll call loophole, I call deduction, and they're going to get rid of it, which is going to have such a huge impact on the commercial market, depreciation, all that stuff. Huge problem. But if I flip the coin and I look for the silver lining or the good, what is very likely happen in a blue wave? I believe it is very likely that they say home ownership is good. And I think there's a very good chance that they incent home ownership, specifically first-time buyers, with some type of tax credit or give back or something. So I would expect something like that out of a blue wave as well.
Well, as long as, and that's the other thing, so that could spur even more, pressure and demand on housing. The problem is what we're not seeing, and this is where housing could come under attack, is affordable housing. So the last time it was subprime lending. So that was supposed to be the incentive to get people into houses that were otherwise not qualified. So what a lot of politicians look at is they look at everybody should own a house. And that's just not true. Not everybody should own a house. A lot of people just aren't qualified to own a house. So there still needs to be qualification. So the question is going to be, how are they going to address that? And there is income inequality in this country that needs to be addressed, but not from a broad redistribution of wealth standpoint. It needs to be, more in a way like you're talking about in terms of incentivizing, entrepreneurship, ownership, for people to get out, not disincentivize people, not to go to work with, huge unemployment checks and things like that, but incentivize people to go to work, reform education, reform programs that can help people start business and get out and stake their claim. The problem is that with a more democratic environment, I think, you're going to be less incentivized to want to create and more incentivized not to create.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the problem you get into with housing. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to incentivize home ownership, how do you do that in a way that, that can be affordable across the board for people who are now renting that don't have a down payment, don't have the ability to pay, taxes, insurance, especially with taxes going up, don't have the ability to pay for repairs when something breaks. That's what happened in the subprime crisis. They had people that had no savings, were week to week on their paychecks, and if they lost their job and the air conditioning went out, they couldn't pay for it, and they were one broken refrigerator away from default, basically,
Mm-hmm.
because you got to keep the fridge working. You can't not have that. You got to keep the air going. You can't not have that. So if you have a choice between paying your car payment, paying for those things, and paying your mortgage, what are you going to do? So that's kind of where the trouble came into the subprime crisis. So the question is going to be, how are they going to fix that? And that's where you get into these, forbearance, you get into rent controls, moratoriums on evictions, all that kind of stuff. So the question is, what does housing look like moving forward if you're trying to really create a fair, level playing field for everybody to participate in home ownership?
Yeah. So a couple of things that I would expect from any politician, whether they were Republican or Democrat, is they're not going to think 3 steps ahead. They're going to think 1 step. And that is why I'm fairly convinced that probably within the first 12 months, again, if there's a blue wave, there'll be a $10,000 to $15,000 tax credit for first-time buyers. It'll be just straight up. They will not look to the second step of, oh my God, we just pulled all this demand forward into a low supply environment, which is only going to jack up prices, make it even less affordable. They're not going to see it that way. They're going to say, hey, we took home ownership from 67% to 71%. Look at us. Not realizing that they've set up the first domino. Like you said, AC goes out, refrigerator goes out, could cause this pain again. But again, the bubble, if this happened, the bubble will inflate, and it can inflate for years. And then the next recession, it'll be the next recession. That's the prick. And then we have a catastrophe again.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting, and it'll be interesting to see where the focus is and what they focus on, if you get a blue wave all the way across the board, that'll be kind of fascinating to watch and see. And then you'll just have to, you're just going to have to anticipate and be ready for it. But, one of the other questions you talked about was interest rates.
Yeah,
so,
let's go there.
Another way to motivate people to buy homes or put people in housing is a zero mortgage rate environment, not zero interest rate, not a Fed funds rate, but zero mortgage rate environment. So I haven't heard anybody talk about that yet. But that could potentially be something coming down the pipe for certain people at certain income levels. They get a government mortgage, zero interest.
That's
40 years or something.
Yeah,
to really make the payments affordable.
That's what I want to talk about, because, I got to tell you, when I first started building a decent portfolio, I never thought we would see mortgage 30-year fixed below 5%. I mean, it was just unfathomable to me. And now, as I sit here, I just heard yesterday a buyer that I know got a 2.5% 30-year mortgage. Good credit, good down payment, all that stuff, but still 2.5. That's half of what I thought was possible. So my question for you leading into this is, could you imagine a world where we have a 1.99 30-year mortgage, or a 0.99, or now you've said 0? I mean, could we see that? What do you think?
Yeah, so the only 0 you could potentially see, now this is for mortgages, okay? You got to understand, where does the money come from for a mortgage? It comes from investors, okay? It comes from, Wall Street investors. These things are sold as securities, or it comes from banks that are actually lending their own money, which again comes from investors. So there has to be a spread for that to work. If there's no money to be made, no money will get lent. The question is, what is the tolerance for that spread? And if you look at the bond market right now, that will give you an indication of where mortgage rates could ultimately go. There has to be some sort of a spread. And I think, the limits on that are probably a point, so maybe you could see 1% interest rates, in the commercial markets, because that still leaves room for spread at scale. The only 0 interest rate environment I think you'll ever see in mortgages is going to have to be a government program where, like you said, if they pass trillions of dollars of whatever, maybe there's $1 trillion of a mortgage product that's set aside for Freddie and Fannie to loan out 0 interest for certain borrowers.
So yeah, I think I had never thought about this. This is why I love talking to experts like you. So in theory, right, if we're just playing it out, blue wave, they want to do home ownership, besides the tax credit of 15 grand, they could, in theory, like you say, set up $1 trillion fund, enable all the banks, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, blah, 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 to issue 30-year mortgages at 0%, and then they will buy them. That way the banks get their fees, right? Doing whatever that is. They make a little spread, or I guess they'll make fees. Then
Mhm.
then the government buys it. So the bank's off the hook, and bingo bango, you got a 30-year mortgage at 0%. I mean, it's feasible.
Yeah, I think at that point, I think the banks might get their money would be in the origination of the loans and the
Oh yeah.
fees, so they in essence become mortgage brokers.
Yeah.
They get paid for the transaction, and then the government holds the note.
Well, just like the
Because
PPP loans, it's exactly what the PPP loans were. The
right,
government did all that money and they just got paid. I mean, Wells Fargo made $300 million processing PPP loans. I mean, that's exactly
yeah,
what would happen.
yeah. So you have to. That's really the only way I think that you would see a zero mortgage rate environment. It would have to be something that the government owns and carries on their balance sheet.
But it's not crazy.
Because the
It's not
commercial
out of
banks,
this world.
right?
Wow.
A bank can't lend you money at 0%. They just
No.
they can't stay in business. So
Yeah.
that's not going to happen.
Yeah, this is amazing to think about. So let me ask you this. What do you think? So let's just call it 2.5 today, because I had a friend tell me he got that yesterday. What do you think the chances are, 0 to 100% of somebody seeing a 1.99 30-year fixed?
I think that's possible, but again, what's the cost? What's the threshold? Where's the break even? So there's a point where a bank just can't make any money and they have a break even. I don't know what that is,
Okay.
For a loan. So I don't know if that's 2%. I don't know if it's 2.5, but sure. I mean, if you're looking at where the Fed funds rate is, and if you go negative, and then you look at where the money is coming from that's looking for yield, there's money going into 0.5, 0.7,
Yeah.
treasuries and bonds, looking for yield. So that money could potentially pour into the mortgage market, for a 2% yield at some point, if that, opportunity is opened up. So,
Okay.
yeah, I mean, I would say, you could probably see it. It's fathomable. I just don't know what the cost is. I don't know.
Yeah,
Where
it's
the
got to
break
be
even is.
close, right? I mean, it's hard for me to imagine the bank with the overhead and all of that they're going to have. I mean, again, I never thought we'd see 2.5. So what do I know? But yeah, I think there's a chance next year we might see 1.99, but I don't think it goes much lower than that, unless, to your point, the government says, I will buy them all. You get your transaction fees, hey ho, let's go.
And look at the auto industry. So, it used to be, 3, 5, 7% for a brand new car. Now you can get, 0 interest for 72 months. So
True.
how does that get financed? Who pays for that? And how's the money made? So, if it can be done in the automobile industry, it can be done in the housing market. Housing is a little bit different, but finance is finance.
Mm.
So the difference is it's the auto dealers and manufacturers that are selling those cars, and they've created the credit facility to loan the money, which again is probably coming from maybe something at at the federal level, backing that up. I'm not sure where and how all that works, but they're just packing it all into the price of
But
the
you
car.
could see, I mean, to your point, I mean, I've already been, you just said cars. I'm like, okay, how would I play that out? So first and foremost, you could see builders offering 0%. Because how does the car manufacturer do it? Well, they take it out of the profit. They just carry it. They carry it there somehow, right? So builders could do it, right? They could add 3,000, 5,000, 7,000 to the cost of a home and carve that out as profit in theory, right? Basically, it's a mortgage pay down, right? Mr. and Mrs. Barrow, you can go get a 1.9. I'm going to allow you, I'm going to sell it to you at 0. So what does that mean? There's a 1.9, whatever that is, there's a cost to the buy down. They just pay it out of the homeowners. Then if you go to existing home, which is the majority of our homes, you could in theory see sellers do the same thing, right? In theory.
And again, that would come from the lenders. So the lenders would be originating that. They would be adding the fees would be all baked into the house.
Yep.
Because it's not all just builders. It's you and me are selling a house. So it's going to have to be done from a financing level, not from the dealer level. Whether the dealer is individuals or builders, whoever is selling the house, they're not going to be paying for the financing. It's going to be at the finance level.
Agreed.
So instead of an interest rate, it's just, I don't know how that works. That would be a tricky one, but
yeah. So the next thing I want to talk about in last topic of the day is everybody's talking about stimulus these days. But what I see coming next that's going to be market moving and we got to be ready for is a huge infrastructure bill. You could call that stimulus, but
Mhm.
I'm gonna call it a bill. And what do I mean by infrastructure? I mean roads, freeways, bridges, railroads, building cement, steel, wood. I think we are going to rebuild America. In many parts, it's crumbling, right? At least California highways are. So I could see a trillion or multi-trillion-dollar bill, frankly, regardless of who's elected. And when I look at that, I think, ooh, what's the side effect? And it's going to be commodities and labor costs going up, which is very inflationary. That's what I see. What do you think?
Yeah, and see that could trickle into the housing market as well
Yeah.
because where are you going to get the labor? So we don't have enough labor right now in the construction industry. Nobody's going into the construction industry. So if you all of a sudden have this this mass infrastructure, spending and drive, number one, there's going to be a lot of fights over who gets what state gets how much, and all that. But now you got to find the people to do the work, and there's not enough people out there as it is now. So where is that help going to come from? Well, if I'm an infrastructure contractor and I'm building bridges and I can't get help, guess where I'm going to go? I'm going to go to everybody who's working on a residential construction site and say, hey man, how much you making? 15, 20 bucks an hour. I'll pay you 40. This is a government contract. I can pay you 40, 50 bucks to come help me build this bridge. So that's what happens. And I'm seeing it in my area. I live in Charlottesville, Virginia, and the residential mechanical trades, workers in the residential mechanical trades, that's plumbing, HVAC, and electrical, are getting pulled out of residential jobs here to go work on commercial jobs in DC because they can get union wages
Mm,
for these bigger buildings and these government contracts. So an electrician that would make 20 bucks an hour here can get 50 to 100 bucks an hour up there,
wow.
depending on their level. So that's helper to journeyman. So that's what you will see happen. So that's going to could put even more stress on the housing market because now you can't, it's going to put stress on getting help and trying to get people in there. So I don't know how they're going to execute on that spending plan because there just aren't enough people out there to do the work right now.
Yeah, labor's a huge part of it, but let's not forget the commodities that go along with building bridges and freeways
Mm-hmm.
and all of that, steel, concrete. We've already seen lumber right here this year go up, 100%, four by
Yeah.
four, two by fours, all that stuff.
Oh yeah, prices the day that package gets passed, steel doubles, concrete doubles, all of that just will double, double and triple. So that'll kill, everything across the board. And we already saw it. So I remember back in probably, what was it, 04, 05, pre-2009, when China was buying up all the steel, buying up all the drywall and all that, you couldn't even get it.
I remember.
Drywall was on allocation
I
and
remember.
it was a fortune, lumber's kind of been there lately, but I remember drywall, insulation, steel, you couldn't get it and prices were just crazy. And it was being allocated by the manufacturers because they couldn't get the raw, goods, even cement, they couldn't even get cement fast enough for concrete. So it's been pretty incredible what those types of things can do across the system. Now, we do need infrastructure spending. We do need to put money there that will create jobs. That's a great place to use, taxpayer dollars. And that's arguably what your tax dollars are supposed to go through. National infrastructure, national defense, welfare, Medicare for those who can't, not those
Mhm.
who won't.
Mhm.
That's what that's supposed to be. That's what our federal government is supposed to do. Not
Agreed.
supposed to go into somebody's pocket, who's studying, some, who knows, turtle in, the middle of a field somewhere and spend millions of dollars studying this one little turtle and why he's not moving.
Yeah. Yeah, it's gonna be interesting because what I fear is because I look at the consumer and cost of capital. And when I think a $1 trillion infrastructure bill, the impact on wages, the impact on commodities, what I see as the next domino is inflation. And what does inflation cause? It causes Fed to raise interest rates. Interest rates get raised. It hurts housing. Inflation keeps going. Interest rates go up. Housing crashes. Now that's a 2 or 3 or 4 year journey, but
Mm-hmm.
that's how far into the future I look at these things.
Yeah.
And right now that looks very feasible, and it all starts with a blue wave. All of those dominoes line up, and once the first one falls, the others are pretty likely, in my opinion.
Yeah. Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see, how the election shakes out, how everything shakes out, what actually happens. But it's going to be a tax and spend environment. There's just no other way around it. And it's going to be good in some areas. It's going to be tough in other areas, and it's the unintended consequences of all good intentions gone bad. It's just hard to foresee every possible thing, every possible outcome. But all we can do is be positive about it.
Yep.
And if something like that gets passed, well, guess what? I'm going to go start a new business.
Nah, yeah. You're going to be building some stuff again, huh?
Exactly. And hey, so from an immigration standpoint and all that, maybe there's a way to open that up and put people to work and
Mhm.
create jobs and things like that. The other big thing we need to do is we need serious tax reform, and we've talked about that before. Where you go to some sort of a fair tax or consumption tax, something that gets everybody equally, so you don't have this huge complicated tax code and people have to spend thousands to hundreds of thousands to millions of dollars on tax professionals to file a tax return.
Mm,
I mean, that's money that could get reinvested.
totally agree.
So there's a lot of things between healthcare and taxation and just term limits and things like that need serious looks and serious reform. That unfortunately, if we do get a blue wave, a lot of those things will not get any attention. I'm not so sure they would even get serious attention if it was the other way. If we had
Yeah.
a red wave,
No, I don't think so either.
you get one party in control and bad things happen, and that's why our government was set up the way it was supposed to be set up, with checks and balances,
Absolutely.
so that these things can't happen.
Yeah. Very cool, Greg. Well, I appreciate your time. This is always fun. Again, folks, if you like these conversation with Greg, please check out his playlist. He has hours of materials there for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Yeah, it was great being here.
Thanks, buddy.